know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are called according to his purpose.
I don't know what we're waiting for here.
Last week we promised you that this would not be a regular sermon or service. We're going to be telling you stories. All right.
So this story of God's guidance begins at the teacher prep college that was called Institut de Lukanga in Kivu province of northern Zaire, which is now again the Democratic Republic of the Congo. That U-shaped building was the classroom block. The clump of trees is hiding the girls' dormitory and the kitchen area. And our house would be right to the, to the left of those trees. The staff housing was on the left of the classroom block, and the student housing, the boys' dormitory and married student housing was on the right.
It's kind of that's kind of two pictures put together. You may have noticed the joint. Right.
Melinda, our firstborn, was 1.5 years old when we arrived in September of 1971. So this was the day before yesterday. And we left when she was 4.5, so we were there for 3 years. Here she's helping her friend in the flower patch. She called him her friend. He was actually one of 2 students that we hired to help them with their tuition. They were the Bayanuza brothers. These people had interesting names. His name was Ndabisobanuya Bayanuza, and his brother was Usrobara Bayanuza. And if you had a class of 40 or so students with names like that, it was a challenge to remember them and learn them.
And that middle picture there, okay, these pictures are pictures of our daughters, some of our daughter's friends. They were other teachers' children. The boys there in the mud, Melinda was not very happy. She had just had her Friday afternoon bath, and so I wouldn't let her join them. But they were, 2 sons were the director's sons, Brian and Roy and Brian. They were 11 months apart and buddies. And then the other 3 boys are the Sabot boys, who actually the father, Claude, is in the BC Conference. He's retired, living on Vancouver Island there. And the third picture there shows them giving Melinda a big hug. They wanted to adopt her because they didn't have any girls in their family. And in the middle picture is her little friend Cherie. And you notice all these, well, Cherie doesn't show in the picture, but she had a little sister, Patty Joe, and an even younger brother, little Skippy, who was just a baby. And she was begging. She wanted a little brother or a little sister so badly. And we actually wanted one too, and it wasn't coming. And we were all praying for one. And eventually it did happen. You can see, happy day. I'm wearing a maternity smock there. We're standing in front of our garden, and actually we took that picture because it was we were so amazed at the sunflowers that were growing behind us. Very fertile volcanic soil there.
Anyway, we had to make some plans because the
baby was on the way.
And the missionary doctor at the Catholic hospital about an hour away was on furlough, and they did 6-month furloughs at that time. And so we needed to find a way out, and we needed to fly out before, what was it?
By 7 months. By 7 months, because it was just small planes, unpressurized, etc., and they wouldn't take you on after that. So we were going to have to go somewhere for 2 months and wait for this
So
baby.
we decided to sell our new car that we just received and use the money to buy round-trip tickets back to Canada. And
He found this picture on the internet. Ours didn't have white wheels, but anyhow.
it was a dark
The
green.
Peugeots were one of the few cars that would stand up to the roads. The roads were not very good, as the next picture will show.
So it's the story of this trip, actually, that is the story of God's providences, and that we want to share with you. So 50 years ago, more than 50 years ago, there, of course, were no cell phones. Answers to letters came in about 4 weeks
If you were,
at the
that would be good.
earliest. And there, we did have a weekly scheduled shortwave radio contact with the church headquarters at Lumumbashi, but that was like 1,000 miles away, air miles. So we were pretty isolated.
We were isolated, yes.
And travel by car could be very interesting.
This is the main highway, by the way.
This is not a logging road. This is the main highway from our school down to Goma. And at certain times of the year, that could swallow a transport truck, and they could sit stuck in there for weeks.
And often nobody could get by. And I remember one time we were going down, and a fish truck was stuck there, and we could smell it a long ways away.
So after having sold our car, we needed a ride down there. And Brother Larry, he had brought this International Travelall, 4-wheel drive, 3/4 ton, rode like a lumber wagon. And
He thought it would be the answer for the school's problems. He'd be able to get supplies for the school. Somebody would usually have to go out every 6 months.
he loaded that up and actually broke springs on the thing going over those roads. Anyway, that was our transport. We climbed into that thing and took off. And it was a pretty rough ride.
I couldn't stay on the seat. You're bouncing so hard. I would hit my head on the roof. I thought, boy, I'm lucky that I'm not prone to miscarry. But after a few hours of that, I decided it might be better to lie down in the back seat.
Anyway,
I don't know how many hours it took, but we didn't count distance by kilometers or miles. We counted it by hours, and we usually considered it about a 14-hour trip.
so we did arrive back in Canada, and then we had to await the arrival of our second child. Baby was just fine in Mummy's tummy. No, there's no more pictures for a while. Sorry, we don't have.
Yeah, the story, we didn't document the story. So
We'll have more pictures this afternoon after lunch. We want to go through and share with you a little bit more about our time in Africa. Anyway, we'll have the old
slides.
35 millimeter slides, the original. So our baby was just fine and in no mood to face the big world outside.
It was a relaxed baby, quite different from our first. I could feel the stretching, but there wasn't very much kicking.
As time passed and school was about to begin, we began to get more anxious about this baby arrive. So we tried several.
Castor oil, I remember, was one, but didn't work. And saunas, walking, hiking, no.
So nothing worked, and so we made arrangements for me to return back to Lukonga, so I needed to teach. The school was ready to start.
He says we, but it was him. I told him, I really don't like you going ahead. And he says, well, I'll plan everything to a T. He got our tickets, everything, and knew exactly when we were going to leave. And I told him, things don't turn out. It doesn't matter how carefully you plan them. They don't turn out in Africa. At least that had been my experience.
Anyway, I left and arrived back in Goma Airport and was met by Larry in his 4x4, and I got my ride back to the school. I began teaching and waiting to hear about the birth of our second child. We had set up a code. So Marilyn would send a telegram or telex to Lubumbashi, our headquarters, and then they would give me the message by shortwave radio. And that kind of communication, the whole world would know before I did if it was a boy or a girl. So we had a code set up so that only I would understand what it was, and it was a girl. And so every week I would go with the director up, you saw those mountains there, go up the mountain to Rawese, where they had the radio tower up there, and we'd have this communication. And it took 3 weeks for that baby to come. Baby sister for Melinda. Now, you need to know that the reason we had to go down that terrible road to Goma and leave Zaire that way was because the border to Uganda had been closed. Idi Amin was the president there, and he was
a tyrant.
They didn't call him Idi Amin, they called him, anyway, I won't say that, because he was into genocide. He was murdering numbers of people.
Thousands.
And the country was actually closed to foreigners. The border was closed. But after coming back from Canada, I found the border was now open. Oh, cool. So I could now go by paved road, much shorter distance. I could go to Kampala, and I could wait there, and there was a nice resort. So I thought, well, we could spend a few days at the resort before we went back to school.
Yeah, it wasn't all paved road. The first 6 hours was with gravel, but
to the border
or dirt.
Was Zaire, but in Uganda.
In Uganda, it was good.
It was paved. Anyway, that was the plan, and but I didn't have much time to get this communicated to Marilyn. See, Marilyn's flight normally would have come from Kelowna to Vancouver to Montreal to Brussels to Entebbe airport and then to Kigali in Rwanda, and I would meet her in Kigali.
That was our plan.
That was the flight plan. And so she didn't have to fly from Entebbe to Kigali. She could get off at Entebbe, and that would be really neat. So much handier and much more pleasant. Anyway, so I needed to get that communicated to her to get off in Entebbe. So I sent a telegram from Lubero. That's where Larry lived. Larry and his wife lived down there, and he traveled back and forth from that town to the school every day for teaching. And so he sent that off, and when he came back a few days later, he told me, well, it didn't go. And why it didn't go, he told me, they told him they didn't know where Canada was. I don't know if that's true or they're just making it up, but anyway, that's what the story was. So they had to resend it. And, you know, time is essence here. It's only, time's running out. So anyway, he came back and said, yeah, they sent it. It went. Okay. Oh, okay. Whew, that's good. All right. So let's see, where are we at now? Now all I needed was a vehicle. And Amirali, the East Indian trader, had bought our Peugeot, and he was willing to loan me his old Mercedes 220 diesel with ball tires and all. And so Marilyn was sure, like she said, that things never worked out in Africa, but I was determined they were going to work out. And so I left early. She was going to come on, I think it was on Tuesday, and I was leaving on Sunday. So I would be in Kampala Monday, all day, rest of Sunday, all day Monday, and Tuesday until evening when the plane was to arrive. Well, things changed. It was a 6-hour trip to the border, so I left early Sunday morning, arrived at noon. Border crossings tended to be interesting places. Because of corruption, border officials were not often paid regularly. That day, they happened to be a little under the influence as well. And because travelers are at their mercy, they can make things quite miserable. I mean, really miserable, unless you offer them money for their services. Sitting in the office, I gave them the documents, and he was asking me the typical questions, but he was just about to hand me back the documents and send me on my way when he asked me a question that I had no idea the answer to. What is the license plate number of your car?
It was a long one.
Can you imagine? How many of you know offhand the license plate number of your car? Those license plate numbers were yay long. I mean, they were long. And they stayed with the car the entire life of the vehicle, whether you sold it or whatever, it was always there. So I suppose maybe people who owned cars knew their license plate number, but I had just picked that car up. I hadn't even looked at the license plate. I had no clue. And I knew that I was caught, because if I pointed out that the license plate number was right in front of him on the document, he could read it for himself, then I would be accused of racism and accusing him of being ignorant and not knowing how to read, which he probably didn't know. Anyway, so I was caught. I didn't know what to do. So I just said, well, sir, it's right there. Man, he accused me of stealing that car. You've stolen that car. Called the guard under gunpoint, forced me to drive that car around the back of the
Little
border
building.
office there. And he sat me down in the chair with a guard beside me. And
Told him he was going to be sent to
going to prison in Kampala.
Kampala,
That's,
which
I was
was
on my way to prison,
notorious.
just waiting for the official to come and get me in prison. Well, that was something that was pretty serious. So, you know, what do you do in those situations, right? You pray, right? The whole trip was been bathed in prayer. We prayed before we started this whole thing. We've been praying the whole way through, and now under these conditions, it was pretty serious. And I thought, well, you know what? I can speak English and French. The natives that come through here, and because the blacks were, you know, the local people could cross the border without problems, they spoke Swahili and French going back into Zaire, because Zaire was a French-speaking country. And Swahili is kind of like the lingua franca. That's the language, the go-between between all the countries. They speak Swahili. And the border officials, because they were Ugandan border officials, they spoke English and Swahili. So I could speak English and French. I could speak to the border officials in English. I could speak to the blacks going through in French, and they couldn't understand my French. But I wanted to communicate to them what was going on so that they could communicate when they got back to Butembo. The school was well known in the area, and they would be able to communicate with the school officials what had happened to me.
Because they weren't expecting him for maybe 2 weeks. Things, you know, cars would break down and that sort of thing. So you didn't get excited if somebody didn't return for a week or two.
I wasn't expected back for quite a while. And
they
I'd
would
be
have no
long
idea.
incarcerated before they ever got suspicious that anything had happened to me. And of course, Marilyn would arrive when nobody to meet her. That would have been, you know. Anyhow, so this guy took a swing at me. He's going to hit me. I managed to duck so I didn't get hit, but it was the kind of thing that was going on. And so finally, after about an hour or so, the boss came in, and he asked me for my documents, and I said, well, he has them. And he asked for the passport and stuff. He looked it over, and he said, well, you can't go through. Sorry, you got to go back. Whew. Well, at least I'm not going to prison. I'm going back. But now, the race is on. Time is a crunch because Marilyn's going to get off in Entebbe, and I'm going to be in Kigali, in Rwanda, and she's going to be in Uganda, and we have no way of communicating, and this This is terrible. So, about turn, head back to the school. As I said, well, this time I need to pick up a helper. So I got a student. One student in the school could have a driver's license. Interesting name. Everybody called him Saint-Sept, and that is French for 117. Can you have a nickname of 117? Saint-Sept. And so he came along with me, and about midnight I'd had it. I had been up early in the morning through all this stress and driving this car with these bald tires through roads like you can't believe. And anyhow, so I said, Sonny said, here, you take the wheel, I'm going to have a sleep. So I went to sleep. Next thing I knew, he's braking hard and saying, Leon, Leon! There was pride of lions right in the road, and he was scared stiff. And said, just slow down, just go slowly, and they'll get out of your way. And so that happened. And I thought, I need to get out and take the wheel. I'm wide awake now. And but there's lions around here. It's probably not the best thing to get out of the car right now. And besides, we're coming up to the barricade for the entrance to the Parc National des Rues. That was the volcanic park. And we have to stop there anyway, so just a few feet. And you know what? Bang! Right after that, I thought that thing. He hit a submerged rock right in the road was crowned, and that rock was submerged there, and he hit it with the oil pan. It was a bang. Oh, no. We got to the gate. I jumped out, looked underneath, and the oil was pouring out of the pan. That car was finished. We had to drive it a few feet into the compound there. And I quickly gave Saint-Sept some money. I said, hey, you look after the car. Here's some money for some food. And I looked around for a vehicle that was leaving. And sure enough, there was, I think I got a picture of this, there was a Toyota van like that, loaded with people. But I needed a ride to Goma, and it was going to Goma. And he said, oh, sure, come on in. So I got in there. There's always room for one more, right, in those taxis. And this guy was an amazing driver. That road at places was total lake. You couldn't see the road at all. It was water everywhere. Muddy. And of course, underneath that, it wasn't mud so much. It was the volcanic rock. But anyway, he got through all that, got to Goma about 12 noon. Now I had to get a telex through to Marilyn at Brussels. She had a 12-hour wait in Brussels, and I knew I had to get that to her before she left Brussels so she wouldn't get off in Entebbe. Guess what? The only telex in Goma was broken. Well, there's a town right across the border called Gisenyi in Rwanda. They have a telex over there. So I walked over there. No electricity. But the electricity may come on at 4 o'clock. Oh, man. Well, let's see. The conference has a Land Rover. But the Land Rover's on assignment. It's out of town. Well, there's a taxi that I can maybe get to Kigali. Taxis cost over $300. I didn't have that kind of money.
That was a month's wage, by the way.
I was stuck. Prayer, right? So I didn't want to borrow that money, and I thought, what am I going to do? So I decided to wait it. Went back at 4 o'clock. Sure enough, electricity was on. Sent the telex. Whew, and headed back to the mission headquarters. The treasurer's wife gave me a nice supper, and I hit the sack, and I was out like a light. So, back at the ranch.
All right. Marley was, I guess, 2 weeks old when I started off back to Africa, and got to Brussels with my 3.5-year-old and my newborn in tow, and Doug had ordered some stuff that I was supposed to pick up in Brussels and take to the school with me. And it wasn't at the airport like it was supposed to be. And we spent
Nothing works as it's supposed to, right?
Well, and this wasn't even Africa. But I spent the next 12 hours looking. I would have had a hotel room for free where we could have had a very pleasant wait, but I spent the 12 hours instead running hither and thither over Brussels trying to find this parcel that I was supposed to pick up. And we found it just in time for him to rush me back to the hotel, grab my suitcases, and tear off to the airport. I got into the airport and I was being paged that I had a telex. It was his message, "Meet you in Kigali." Oh, okay, that's good. If he sent me a telex, that means he's not home. He must already be at least to Goma. And from Goma to Kigali, yes, he would be there to meet me. So that gave me a relaxing trip back. I had no idea what he had just been through. When I got to, as we were coming down to land in Kigali, I'm looking.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, but you're going to talk about.
I got the telex.
Yeah, but in Tebby, the situation is.
Oh, yeah. You know,
okay,
let me get a little farther.
Let
me get a little farther. So I'm looking down at the sea of faces, all these black faces, and I knew there should be one white one. And there's nobody there that matched his looks. And I'm wondering, what on earth happened? You know, he was either probably at Goma or maybe the little, what is it, the one on the Rwandan side, Gisenyi. So something happened between there and Kigali, because I knew he would leave no stone unturned to be there. I mean, that's just who he is. And why wasn't he there? Well, I knew the roads there in Rwanda, you know, like this, up and down, very, very steep, muddy roads, and with rain, maybe he went over the edge. But when you came down, you had to often drive through what they called drifts, which was a river, and they would have a raised part for you to go over. But if it rained, the river would rise quite quickly, and the current would be very swift, and I could imagine him being swept off. I have a really good imagination, by the way, and so I'm just wondering what it was that had happened to him that he wouldn't be there, and what am I supposed to do? So I get off and I try to go through customs, and the guy said I had to pay, I forget what it was, the amount. It wasn't all that much, American. Well, I knew he wanted hard currency. I didn't have American money, but I did have Canadian, and believe it or not, Canadian at that time, the currency was just a tiny bit higher than, you know, maybe a cent or two on a dollar, a very small amount, but it was actually worth more than the American, and it was the hard currency, so he should have been happy to take it. I had enough in my purse that I could have paid that amount, but no, it had to be American. I tried to explain in my bad French that I didn't have American money. I was not an American, and it didn't make any difference. I think, you know, it was something about a little bit of power over this white woman, but anything I suggested or tried wasn't working. And here I was in a foreign country, no money except $20-some Canadian, and what am I supposed to do? And besides that, what's happened to Doug? So I did what I guess many women would do. I broke down. I'm not at least at that time, I didn't cry that easily, but I broke down. I really was at my wit's end. I had no idea what I was going to do. Well, a French lady happened to be passing through right then, and she saw me crying and came over and asked what my problem was. So I explained to her, and so she gave the fellow a piece of her mind and took me and our two little girls under her wing and drove. She says, I know where there's an Adventist mission. and I'll take you to the Adventist mission, and they'll know what to do. So she drove us out to this Adventist mission, and it was a black-run mission, and they did have a guest house, but it was being used as a storage room, storage shed right then, and he had no place to put me up. So she took me into town and put me in a hotel. Well, I still didn't know where Doug was. I had a roof over our heads, but I went to bed that night pretty concerned about what had happened to my husband. Okay, maybe I'll let you carry on then, and I'll save the other bit.
So, yeah, back in Goma, I was awakened by a knock at the door early in the morning. And who's there? Sandy said, "What? I left you at the park to look after the car. Where's the car? I drove it here." "What? With a hole in the oil pan like that? Through that mud and lake? You drove that car here? It must be toast." Well, it wasn't. These African people can be pretty ingenious. And he didn't say whoa in a bad place. He took that money I gave him, and he bought a chunk of solder. And he used palm oil and a machete that he heated in a flame, in a fire that he built. And he cold soldered that hole while the oil pan was in place. He tried to take it off. Now, if you know anything about Mercedes-Benz, you know, the old ones at least, had Allen keys for the oil pan. And those things get full of mud and oil and crud, and what they have is a tool that's about this long, with a T-bar on it, and they use a hammer and they drive it up into those Allen keys and they twist that thing off. Well, he didn't have all that kind of stuff, and so he wasn't able to get he got some of the nuts off, but not all the bolts off, but not all of them. So he had to solder this thing in place, and he drove this thing, I forget how many hours, but anyway, with this cold solder joint, cold solder fix on this leak. Held. So now, the question is, am I going to drive this thing the way it is, all the way to Kigali, or am I going to wait and get it fixed properly? Get the pan off, get it brazed, and with a proper job. And I thought, well, you know what? If I get halfway there and this thing breaks loose, I'm going to be in real trouble. So I better take the time and get it fixed, although I know I'm going to be late. So that's why I wasn't there. Anyway.
Let me maybe fill in now. Would this be a good place to fill in?
Okay.
Okay, meanwhile, what was happening behind the scenes that we didn't know about was that telex that Doug had sent a couple of weeks earlier had never gotten to me. I had no idea that I was supposed to get off at Entebbe. And he had no idea that I didn't have it. If I had gotten that telegram and gotten off at Entebbe, we'd have been in big trouble. But meanwhile, what he didn't know was that the border had closed again, and the flights, no flights were coming into Entebbe. So although that was the usual stopping place for the planes headed further south, they wouldn't have been able to stop there. So if he had been waiting there for me in Entebbe, and I couldn't get off, I couldn't get off even if I had known, I would have gone straight on to Kigali. I don't know how we would have connected. We've often wondered, how would we have ever found each other? I don't know. It would have been terrible. God knew he had to stop that guy. And he found a way to do it.
So anyway, after listening to this pastor tell me what great things he had done to rescue my wife, it took him about an hour to tell the story. He finally told me where she was at. So I left Sandy set with him, and I went to the hotel, and
Do you have
this is what I found. Our new baby girl, Marley Jean, asleep in a suitcase. Praise the Lord. Now, all we had to do was get back to the school. But that's a story for another time.
It took us 3 days to get back.
I kind of
I
agree
won't
with...
even tell what went on during those 3 days, except that without water and without food and with all the stress, my milk dried up.
So I came to the conclusion that very little goes on as planned in Africa, at least in those days. So Melinda had her dream come true. She had a little baby sister that she was proud big sister, and Mom and Dad were proud parents and thankful that all things had worked together for good. Now,
And
for us, that was the most amazing experience of God's leading and overriding our plans to make things come together.
you know, there are two quotes that come to my mind. Well, it's not going to be exact quotes, but paraphrases. And one is that God has 1,000 ways. When we can't come up with one solution, he has 1,000 ways. Another, that we do not have to fear for the future, except as we forget how God has led us in the past. And this is, to us, we have thought of this story many, many times. And, you know, now when it seems like everything's going wrong, and I'm starting to think, yikes, you know, what are we supposed to do? And Doug will just say, I wonder what God has in mind. So I guess our challenge is to you is when everything seems to be going wrong, and often, you know, I think everybody hits spots in their life where they wonder, what on earth is going on? What am I supposed to do? Just remember how God has led you in the past, and do not fear for the future.
Amen. So, thank you for sharing that story. We haven't told it for a long time, but we wanted to share it with you. Yes?
I just have a question, because I think there was a little gap there in the date. So you said that, I'm just trying to figure this out. How did you know that she was in that airport?
The reason he was, first of all, he was trying to keep it short, because you pay for every word. And he knew, he thought he knew that I was planning to get off at Entebbe. Now, I better not get off at Entebbe. I better get off at Kigali. He didn't know that Entebbe was closed anyhow. And he didn't know that I had no idea I was supposed to get off even if it had stopped.
So how did he know that you were at the spot that you were supposed to be at? Or that,
What, in Brussels?
no, I mean,
Like which pastor was it that?
yeah.
Where did that pastor come in that was sharing how he saved you? Where did he come in?
Oh, that was, remember that mission that she said that she knew about? That French lady knew about? So she took me there, and he couldn't put me up.
And then
Yeah.
I went to that mission when I went to Kigali because Sandy Set knew about it.
He was from Rwanda,
Yeah.
so he knew that area.
He knew that area and he knew that mission. And I thought if she's anywhere, she's probably connected with the church somehow. So that's how we got. Yeah, thank you for clarifying that, June. That was a little point that I missed. Yep. Okay. Yeah,
I was
Ron?
wondering if maybe after lunch or something downstairs on the TV, if you could bring up your maps and show us these places that you've been talking
Oh, okay.
about, how far apart they are.
Yeah. We can do that. Yeah.